This floor is for professionals, not someone who looks like they crawled out of a refugee camp.
Craig Dutton said it loud, in the middle of a packed corporate lobby, looking straight at a black man standing by the front desk. Wesley Adams didn't flinch.
I'm Wesley Adams. I have a 10 o'clock meeting here.
Craig got in his face.
Your name means nothing here. Get out before I have security drag you out.
Dead silence. A dozen people watched. Nobody said a word. Wesley turned and walked outside. He sat on a concrete bench in front of that building for 2 hours. But Craig Dutton had no idea who he'd just thrown out. And by the time he found out, it was already too late. 6 hours earlier, the morning sun was barely up over Charlotte, North Carolina. Wesley Adams stood in his kitchen, pouring black coffee into a plain white mug. The house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness, the kind that comes from a man who likes his mornings slow. The kitchen smelled like fresh grounds and toast. Nothing fancy. A simple counter, a wooden table with a few documents spread across it. Wesley picked up a pen and circled a number near the bottom of a page. $300 million. That was the deal he was about to close. On the wall behind him hung 3 framed photographs. The first showed his father in a military dress uniform, shoulders back, chin up, eyes that didn't ask for permission. The second was his mother standing outside a Baptist church in a floral dress, smiling so wide you could feel the warmth through the glass. The third was Wesley, shaking hands with the governor of North Carolina at a small business summit 2 years ago. None of these photos were hung to impress anyone. Wesley lived alone. Almost nobody visited. They were there because they reminded him where he came from. Wesley grew up in a neighborhood where the sidewalks cracked before anyone bothered to fix them. His father drove a city bus for 31 years. His mother cleaned houses 6 days a week. They never complained. They just told him the same thing over and over. Be so good, they can't pretend you don't exist. He listened. Full scholarship to Howard University, MBA from Wharton. By 35, he had launched Pinnacle Equity Group out of a one-room office with a borrowed desk. 15 years later, the firm managed over $4 billion in assets across 3 states. But if you saw Wesley Adams on the street, you wouldn't know any of that. He grabbed his keys off the counter. A Honda Accord key fob, 3 years old, dark gray, not a single scratch because he kept it clean. He could have driven anything, a Mercedes, a Porsche, a matte black Range Rover like the ones his colleagues parked in their driveways. He chose the Accord because he believed your car shouldn't do the talking for you. That choice would matter later. More than he knew. He backed out of the driveway at exactly 8:15. The drive to downtown Charlotte would take about 40 minutes. Pinnacle Equity Group had been in talks with Lakebridge Consulting for nearly 4 months. Emails, phone calls, financial reviews, due diligence reports, all handled through intermediaries and junior associates on both sides. Today was the first face-to-face. The day the deal would become real. Here's the thing. Nobody at Lakebridge had ever met Wesley in person. They knew the name Pinnacle Equity Group. They knew the numbers. They knew a managing partner was coming. But they had never seen his face, never heard his voice, never had a reason to picture what he looked like. And that gap between what they expected and who walked through the door was about to blow the whole thing apart. Now, let's talk about Craig Dutton. Craig was 38 years old, regional operations manager at Lakebridge Consulting Group, the kind of title that sounds important until you realize it mostly means scheduling conference rooms and managing visitor logistics. But Craig didn't see it that way. To Craig, that title meant power. It meant he decided who got in and who didn't. He arrived at the office at 8:45 that morning. Stood in the bathroom mirror for 6 full minutes, adjusting his tie, fixing his hair, practicing his handshake in the air. Today was the big meeting, the one that could save the company. And Craig wanted Sandra Ellis, the CEO, to see him at the center of it. What you need to know about Craig is this. He had 3 HR complaints in the past 2 years, all from people of color, all dismissed with a written warning and a closed file. Nothing stuck. Nothing ever did. And then there was Diane Caldwell, mid-40s, receptionist at Lakebridge for 6 years. She sat behind that front desk every single day and saw everything. She saw Craig belittle the cleaning crew. She heard the jokes about diversity hires. She watched him talk down to anyone who didn't look like him. She never reported it. She had 2 kids and a mortgage. She kept her head down and her mouth shut. That morning, all 3 of them were on a collision course inside the same building, and not one of them knew what was coming. Wesley pulled into the parking garage at 9:43. He grabbed his portfolio from the passenger seat, checked his blazer in the rearview mirror, and stepped out. The parking garage smelled like oil and warm concrete. His shoes echoed against the floor with each step. He walked past rows of BMWs, Audis, and a few Teslas with vanity plates. His gray Honda Accord sat between a white Lexus and a black Mercedes. It looked like a typo in a sentence full of capital letters. He didn't care. The elevator took him to the 14th floor. The doors opened to a wide lobby with floor-to-ceiling glass walls. Everything was polished. Marble floors, recessed lighting, the faint hum of an air conditioning system that probably cost more than most people's rent. A large silver sign on the wall read, Lakebridge Consulting Group, in clean, modern font. Diane Caldwell sat behind the front desk. She looked up and smiled when Wesley approached. "Good morning. How can I help you?"
Morning. Wesley Adams, here for the 10 o'clock with your leadership team. Pinnacle Equity Group.
Diane nodded and started typing his name into the system. Her fingers moved quickly. She found the appointment almost immediately. Confirmed, flagged as priority, highlighted in red on the internal calendar. She was about to print a visitor badge when she heard footsteps behind her. Craig Dutton came around the corner with a Bluetooth earpiece in one ear and a coffee in his hand. He was walking fast, the way people walk when they want everyone to know they're busy. He glanced toward the front desk, saw Wesley, and stopped. Not because he recognized him, because he didn't. Craig's eyes started at Wesley's shoes. Clean but not designer. Moved to his blazer. Fitted but no visible label. Then to his face. And that was where Craig made his decision. Not based on credentials, not based on appointment records, based on nothing but what he saw. You already heard what he said. The refugee line, the threats, the demand to leave. But here's what happened right after Wesley walked out that front door. Diane sat frozen at her desk. Her hands were still hovering over the keyboard. She had the visitor badge half printed. Wesley's name was right there on her screen. Confirmed appointment, priority status, 10 o'clock sharp. She opened her mouth to say something, but Craig was already turning the corner. He called back over his shoulder without looking. "Don't badge anyone in unless I approve it first. We've got a major meeting today and I don't need random people wandering around." Random people? Diane stared at the screen. Wesley Adams, Pinnacle Equity Group, managing partner. The words were right there in front of her. She knew Craig was wrong. She knew it in her gut, in her chest, in the way her stomach turned. But she closed the badge printer, and she said nothing. Outside, Wesley sat down on a concrete bench near the building's main entrance. The sun was already getting warm. He could feel it on the back of his neck. He placed his portfolio beside him and pulled out his phone. 9:51 a.m., 9 minutes before the meeting. He texted Terrence Shaw, his junior partner. "At the building. Slight delay. We'll update." Terrence replied instantly. "Everything good?" Wesley typed back, "We'll see." He didn't explain what happened. Not yet. He sat there and waited. Because Wesley Adams had been in situations like this before. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Close enough to know the pattern. The pattern goes like this. They look at you. They decide you don't belong. They make you prove that you do. And even when you prove it, they find a new reason to doubt you. Wesley had been proving himself his entire life. He was tired of it. But he was also patient. And patience, in his experience, was the most dangerous weapon a man could carry. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Through the glass doors, Wesley could see the lobby. He watched a white man in a gray suit walk up to the front desk, exchange a quick greeting with Diane, and badge through without a single question. 2 minutes later, a white woman in heels did the same thing. No ID, no appointment check, just a smile and a wave. 45 minutes now. Wesley took out a small notebook from inside his portfolio. He wrote down the time. He wrote down what Craig had said, every word, as close to exact as he could remember. He wrote down the names he could see on badges through the glass. He wrote down the weather, the temperature, the color of the bench, the direction of the sun. Details. Because Wesley knew that details were what held up in rooms where people tried to deny the truth. 1 hour. He stood up, walked back inside, and approached Diane. His voice was calm and even. No anger, no frustration. Just a man asking a simple question. "Excuse me, I checked in almost an hour ago. Can you tell me the status of my meeting?" Diane's face turned red. Not from anger, from shame. She picked up the phone and dialed Craig's extension. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "Craig, the gentleman from Pinnacle is still in the lobby. He's been waiting for—" Craig cut her off. "Tell him to wait. I'm handling it." That was all. 3 seconds. Click. Diane put the phone down slowly. She looked at Wesley with eyes that said everything her mouth wouldn't. "He said it should be just a few more minutes. I'm sorry." Wesley nodded. "Thank you." He walked back outside and sat down again. 1 hour and 15 minutes. The bench was getting hot from the sun. Wesley shifted his weight. He could feel the heat through his pants. A bead of sweat ran down the side of his face. He wiped it with the back of his hand and kept writing in his notebook. 1 hour and 30 minutes. Craig stepped into the lobby again. This time he wasn't alone. A junior colleague, a young white guy in a slim-fit shirt, walked beside him. They were heading toward the elevator. Craig glanced through the glass doors and saw Wesley still sitting on the bench outside. He nudged the junior colleague with his elbow and tilted his head toward Wesley. "See that guy? Been hanging around since this morning. I already told him to leave. Security in this building is a joke. Anyone can just walk in and sit down like they own the place." The junior colleague looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Wesley, then back at Craig. He didn't laugh. He didn't agree. But he didn't say anything either. Craig shrugged. "Whatever. Not my problem if he wants to sit in the heat all day." They disappeared into the elevator. 1 hour and 45 minutes. Wesley's phone buzzed. A text from Terrence. "Bro, you've been there almost 2 hours. What's going on?" Wesley didn't reply. He just kept writing. 2 hours. 120 minutes. That's how long Wesley Adams, managing partner of a $4 billion private equity firm, sat on a concrete bench in the North Carolina sun because a man named Craig Dutton decided he didn't belong. Inside the building, 14 floors up, the conference room was getting tense. Nolan Foster, senior VP of Lakebridge, sat at the head of a long glass table. 2 other executives sat beside him, laptops open, presentation loaded, water glasses filled. Everything ready, except the guest of honor. Nolan checked his watch for the 5th time. He looked at Craig, who sat at the far end of the table scrolling through his phone like nothing was wrong. "Craig, have we heard from the Pinnacle team? They're 2 hours late." Craig barely looked up. "Maybe they got cold feet. These smaller firms, you know how it is. Big talk, no follow-through." Nolan didn't like that answer. Pinnacle Equity Group wasn't a small firm. He knew the numbers. He knew what this deal meant. So he did what Craig should have done 2 hours ago. He picked up the phone and called Pinnacle Equity Group directly. Terrence Shaw answered on the second ring. "This is Nolan Foster from Lakebridge Consulting. We've been waiting for your managing partner. Is Mr. Adams still planning to attend?" There was a pause on the other end. Then Terrence's voice came through, calm but sharp. "Wesley left for your office over 2 hours ago. He should be sitting in your building right now." Nolan's face went white. He looked at Craig. Craig was still scrolling. "I'll call you right back," Nolan said, and he hung up. Nolan stood up so fast his chair rolled back and hit the wall. The two executives at the table looked up. Craig finally put his phone down. "What's wrong?" Craig asked. Nolan didn't answer. He was already out the door. He moved through the hallway with long, quick strides. His shoes hit the tile hard enough that people in nearby offices looked up from their desks. He punched the elevator button, waited 3 seconds, punched it again. The number above the door wasn't moving fast enough. He took the stairs. 14 floors. His breath was short by the time he pushed through the stairwell door into the lobby. His tie was loose. His forehead was damp. He scanned the room, past Diane at the desk, past the glass partition, past the waiting chairs. No Wesley. Then he looked through the front doors, and there he was. A black man in a navy blazer sitting on a concrete bench in the sun. Alone. Portfolio beside him. Notebook in his lap. Nolan pushed through the glass doors and stepped outside. The heat hit him like a wall. It was almost noon now. The bench must have been burning. "Mr. Adams?" Wesley looked up. His face was calm. Not angry, not defeated, just still. The way a man looks when nothing surprises him anymore. "That's me." Nolan extended his hand. It was shaking slightly. "Nolan Foster, Senior Vice President. Mr. Adams, I don't even know what to say. We've been in the conference room waiting for you for 2 hours." Wesley stood up slowly. He shook Nolan's hand with a firm, steady grip. "I've been right here, Mr. Foster, since 9:45 this morning. Your operations manager told me to leave the building, so I've been sitting on this bench." Nolan's mouth opened, but nothing came out for a moment. He turned back toward the glass doors. Through them, he could see Diane at the front desk. She was already watching. Her eyes were red. "Diane," Nolan said as he walked back inside. "What happened?" Diane stood up. Her hands were trembling. She spoke quickly, like the words had been stuck in her throat for 2 hours, and now they were finally falling out. "Mr. Adams checked in at 9:45. I had his appointment on screen. I was printing his badge when Craig came through. Craig told him to leave. Then Craig told me not to badge anyone without his approval. I tried calling Craig when Mr. Adams came back at the 1-hour mark. Craig said to tell him to wait." Her voice cracked on the last word. Nolan closed his eyes. He pressed both palms flat on the desk and exhaled slowly through his nose. When he opened his eyes again, something behind them had shifted. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was fury wrapped in a suit. He turned back to Wesley. "Mr. Adams, please, come with me. I'll take you to the conference room personally." But before they could move, the elevator chimed. Craig Dutton stepped into the lobby. He was holding a fresh coffee. His Bluetooth earpiece was still in. He looked relaxed, the way a man looks when he has no idea the ground beneath him is already gone. Then he saw it. Wesley standing next to Nolan. Nolan's hand on Wesley's shoulder. Diane standing behind the desk with tears in her eyes. Craig's smile faded, but it didn't disappear. Not yet. He walked over with that same confident stride. "Nolan, what's going on? Is this about the Pinnacle meeting? I told you, they probably—" "This is Wesley Adams," Nolan said. His voice was flat, controlled. Managing partner of Pinnacle Equity Group. He's been sitting outside this building for 2 hours because you told him to leave. Craig blinked. He looked at Wesley, then back at Nolan. His coffee hand dropped slightly. But here's the thing about Craig Dutton. He didn't apologize. He didn't backtrack. He doubled down.
Okay, hold on. Anyone can say they're a managing partner. I've never seen this man before.
He turned to Wesley. You got some kind of ID, a business card, something to verify who you actually are? The lobby was no longer empty. 3 employees had stopped near the glass partition. A man from the mailroom stood by the elevator holding a cart. Diane's coworker at the second desk had pulled her headset off and was watching openly. Wesley reached into his portfolio. He pulled out a single business card, cream-colored, thick stock, embossed lettering. He placed it on the front desk without a word. Craig barely glanced at it. He pushed it aside with one finger. Look, I think there's been a mix-up. Are you sure you're not with the catering company? We've got lunch being set up downstairs, and I think they're short a few people. Diane gasped. She actually gasped, a sharp intake of breath that echoed off the marble walls. The man by the elevator set his cart down. One of the employees near the glass put her hand over her mouth. Wesley didn't move. He stood perfectly still. His hands were at his sides. His jaw tightened, just barely, just enough that you'd only notice if you were looking. But his voice stayed level. I've been sitting outside this building for 2 hours. You didn't ask my name. You didn't check the guest list. You didn't call anyone. You looked at me and decided I didn't belong here. He paused. The lobby was silent enough to hear the air conditioning. We both know why. Craig's face changed. The confidence cracked. Something behind his eyes shifted. Not guilt, not yet, but the first flicker of a man realizing he's standing on a trap door. He tried to laugh. It came out dry and broken. Hey, come on. It was just a misunderstanding. No reason to make this a whole thing. Nobody laughed with him. Nobody nodded. The lobby stayed frozen. That's when the elevator chimed again. Terrence Shaw walked into the lobby. 6'2", tailored charcoal suit, leather portfolio with the Pinnacle Equity Group logo stamped in gold on the front. He moved like a man who knew exactly where he was going and didn't need anyone to point the way. Behind him, through the lobby windows, you could see it. A black Escalade parked at the front entrance with a small Pinnacle Equity Group placard on the dashboard. Terrence walked straight to Wesley. They shook hands, a firm grip between 2 men who had done this 1,000 times. Everything all right? Terrence asked. Wesley glanced at Craig. We were just sorting out a misunderstanding. Terrence looked at Craig, then at Diane, then at the business card still sitting on the front desk where Craig had pushed it aside. He picked it up, read it, and placed it back down, face up this time. Craig's eyes went to the Escalade outside, then to Terrence's suit, then to the gold-embossed portfolio. His brain was doing the math it should have done 2 hours ago. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Nolan stepped in. His voice was no longer calm. It was steel, wrapped in a whisper. Craig, go to your office. Now. Nolan, I can explain. Now. Craig stood there for 1 more second. He looked around the lobby, at the employees watching, at Diane wiping her eyes, at Wesley standing tall with Terrence beside him, at Nolan's face that had turned to stone. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. His coffee was still in his hand. His Bluetooth earpiece was still in his ear. But his shoulders were different now. Lower, smaller, like the air had been let out of him. The elevator doors closed, and Craig Dutton disappeared. Nolan turned to Wesley. His voice softened, but the weight behind it was enormous. Mr. Adams, I cannot begin to express. Please, let me take you to the conference room. Whatever you need. Wesley picked up his portfolio. He looked at Diane. She was still standing behind the desk, tears streaming silently down her face. He gave her a small nod. Not forgiveness, not blame, just acknowledgement. Then he followed Nolan down the hallway. Terrence walked beside him. Their footsteps echoed in perfect rhythm against the marble floor. Behind them, the lobby slowly started breathing again. The conference room was on the 14th floor. Glass walls on 3 sides, a long mahogany table that could seat 12. At the far end, a mounted screen displayed the Lake Bridge Consulting logo, spinning slowly like it was waiting for someone important to arrive. 2 executives were already seated. A woman named Patricia in a cream blazer with a pen behind her ear. A man named Garrett in a navy vest who hadn't touched his water in 20 minutes. Both of them looked nervous. Both of them stood up when Wesley walked in. Nolan made the introductions quickly, too quickly. He was trying to paste over 2 hours of damage with 30 seconds of pleasantries. Wesley shook their hands. Terrence nodded. They sat down. The room smelled like fresh coffee and dry erase markers. The air conditioning hummed just loud enough to fill the silence. Outside the glass walls, employees moved through the hallway in slow motion, glancing in, pretending not to, glancing again. Everyone at that table expected Wesley to open his portfolio and start the pitch. Pull out the term sheet, walk through the numbers, get the deal done. Wesley didn't open his portfolio. He placed both hands flat on the table. His fingers were steady. His back was straight. He looked at each person in the room, Nolan, Patricia, Garrett, one at a time. Then he spoke. Before we discuss any numbers, I need to tell you what happened this morning. The room went still. Wesley started from the beginning. 9:45 arrival. Diane at the front desk. The appointment confirmed on screen. Then Craig. The words Craig used. The refugee comment. The demand to leave. The threat to call security. He told them about the bench outside. The heat. The sweat running down the back of his neck. The white visitors he watched badge through the lobby without a single question while he sat in the sun. He told them about the 1-hour mark. Diane's phone call. Craig's 3-word response, tell him to wait. He told them about the catering comment, the gasps, the silence. Wesley spoke for 6 uninterrupted minutes. His voice never rose. His hands never moved. He recited timestamps from his notebook like a man reading coordinates on a map. Every detail, every word, every second. When he finished, Patricia had her hand over her mouth. Garrett was staring at the table. Nolan's eyes were closed. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Wesley reached into his portfolio. He pulled out a bound document, 46 pages, printed on heavy stock paper, held together with a black clip. He placed it on the table and slid it to the center. This is the term sheet for a $300 million acquisition of a 40% controlling stake in Lake Bridge Consulting Group. My legal team finalized it last night. I drove here this morning ready to sign it. He let that sit for a moment. The number filled the room like smoke. But I need you to understand something. This deal doesn't just make me an investor. A 40% controlling stake means I would have a seat on your board. I would have a voice in hiring. I would have direct oversight of company operations. He paused. In other words, the man your operations manager threw out of this building this morning was about to become his boss. Patricia closed her laptop. Garrett leaned back in his chair and exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for 10 minutes. Nolan pressed his thumb and forefinger against the bridge of his nose and kept them there. Wesley let the silence do its work. He didn't rush. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice even now. He simply let the truth take up every inch of space in that room. Then he continued, "I came here today prepared to sign this deal. I believed in what Lakebridge could become with the right investment and the right leadership, but I will not put a single dollar into a company that allows someone like Craig Dutton to be the first face a visitor sees." He tapped the term sheet with one finger. "What happens to me today wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a miscommunication. It was a decision. Craig looked at me and made a decision based on what he saw, nothing else. And the fact that he felt comfortable doing that, in a public lobby, in front of your staff, tells me this isn't the first time." Nolan opened his mouth. Wesley held up one hand, gently, not aggressively, but the meaning was clear. He wasn't done. "I'm not going to walk away from this table today, but I'm not going to sign anything either. Not yet." He stood up. Terrence stood with him. "You have 48 hours. Show me that what happened today is not who this company is. Show me that Craig Dutton's behavior was an exception, not the culture. Because if it's the culture, then no amount of money is going to fix it. And I'll take this deal somewhere else." Wesley picked up his portfolio. He extended his hand to Nolan. Nolan took it with both hands, gripping tight, the way a man grips something he's afraid of losing. 48 hours, Mr. Foster." Wesley and Terrence walked out of the conference room. Their footsteps faded down the hallway. The glass door swung shut behind them with a soft click. Inside the room, nobody moved for a very long time. The call went up the chain in under an hour. Sandra Ellis, CEO of Lakebridge Consulting Group, was in a board meeting across town when her phone lit up. 3 missed calls from Nolan, 2 texts. The second one read, "Emergency, come back now." Sandra was the kind of CEO who didn't panic easily. She'd navigated 2 recessions, a hostile takeover attempt, and a complete rebranding, all in the last decade. But when she walked into her corner office at 1:30 that afternoon, and Nolan told her what happened, her face didn't just fall. It collapsed. "Show me the footage," she said. Nolan pulled up the security feed from the lobby. 4 camera angles, full audio from the desk microphone. Every second of it captured, from the moment Craig pointed at Wesley to the moment Wesley walked out the front door. Sandra watched the refugee comment. She watched Craig wave Diane off. She watched Wesley sit on that bench in the sun. She watched the clock in the corner of the screen tick from 9:51 to 11:45. She watched the catering comment. She watched Diane gasp. She watched 6 employees stand frozen while a man was humiliated 10 feet in front of them. When the footage ended, Sandra didn't say anything for a full minute. She pressed her palms flat against her desk, the same way Wesley had pressed his against the conference table, and stared at the frozen frame on the screen. Craig's face. Mid-sentence. Mouth open. Finger pointing. Then she picked up the phone. "Send Craig Dutton to my office. Now." Craig walked in 4 minutes later. His tie was loosened. His Bluetooth earpiece was gone. He looked like a man who had been sitting alone in a room rehearsing excuses. He started talking before he even sat down. "Sandra, listen. This was a misunderstanding. I didn't know who he was. There was no name tag, no badge, nothing. I was just following standard visitor protocol. Anyone would have. Sit down." Craig sat. Sandra turned her laptop around so the screen faced him. She pressed play. The lobby footage started again. Craig watched himself on camera, pointing, dismissing, laughing, threatening. The color left his face in stages. First the cheeks, then the lips, then everything. "That's you," Sandra said. "That's your voice. That's the lobby of this company. And that man you told to leave, the one you asked if he was with the catering company, was about to sign a $300 million deal that would have saved every job on this floor, including yours." Craig opened his mouth. Sandra held up one finger. You cost this company $300 million in 2 hours, Craig. 2 hours. Craig shifted in his chair. His rehearsed script was falling apart. He tried a different angle. I was just being cautious. We've had people walk in off the street before. I was protecting the office. Sandra leaned forward. Show me the security protocol that says black visitors wait outside while white visitors badge through. Show me that document, Craig. I'll wait. Silence. That's what I thought. Sandra stood up. She walked to the door and opened it. On the other side stood 2 members of the HR team and a security officer. Craig Dutton, you are suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation into your conduct. Your badge has been deactivated. These officers will escort you to collect your personal belongings, and then you will leave this building. Craig stood up slowly. His legs didn't look steady. He reached for his coffee mug on Sandra's desk, a reflex, something to hold, and Sandra moved it out of reach. You don't get to take anything from this office today. The security officer stepped forward. Craig looked at him. The same kind of security guard Craig had threatened to call on Wesley just 3 hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that room. Craig walked out between the 2 HR representatives and the security officer. They passed through the hallway. Employees watched from their desks. Nobody spoke. Nobody whispered. They just watched. The elevator doors opened. Craig stepped in. The doors closed. That evening, Nolan called Wesley personally. He told him about the suspension. He told him about the footage. He told him the investigation had already begun. Wesley listened. When Nolan finished, Wesley said 2 words. 48 hours. Then he hung up. But the story didn't end with Craig's suspension, not even close. Because the next morning, Diane Caldwell walked into Sandra's office and asked to make a formal statement. And what she said changed everything. Diane sat across from Sandra with a printed statement in her hands. 3 pages, single-spaced. She had been up all night writing it. Her fingers were shaking when she set the pages on the desk, but her voice wasn't. Not anymore. She had spent 6 years keeping her mouth shut. That was over now. Craig has done this before, she said. More than once. She told Sandra about the Latina consultant who came in 8 months ago for a scheduled meeting with the finance team. Craig stopped her at the front desk, asked if she was there to clean the offices, and told her the help entrance was on the lower level. The woman left. She never came back. The meeting was never rescheduled. She told Sandra about the South Asian vendor who arrived for a technology demo 6 months before that. Craig asked him 3 times for identification, then made him wait in the lobby for 45 minutes while verifying his credentials. The vendor's credentials were fine. His appointment was confirmed. Craig just didn't like the way he looked. That vendor left too. His company pulled the contract a week later. No one at Lakebridge ever asked why. Diane placed a 3rd sheet on the desk. It was a printout of internal visitor logs she had saved on her personal drive. Dates, times, names. Notes she had written to herself in the margins. Small things like, Craig redirected visitor, and guest asked to wait without reason. Sandra read the pages in silence. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked at Diane for a long time. Why didn't you report this before? Diane's eyes filled with tears. Because the last person who reported Craig got moved to a different floor, and the person before that got let go during the next round of layoffs. I have 2 kids, Sandra. I couldn't afford to be next. Sandra nodded slowly. She didn't argue. She didn't reassure. She just said, You're not going to be next. I promise you that. That afternoon, Sandra hired an external investigation firm, Collins and Whitmore, specialists in workplace discrimination cases. They were given full access to Lakebridge's HR records, internal emails, visitor logs, and security footage going back 3 years. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Craig Dutton had filed 14 security concern reports over 3 years. 12 of them involved non-white visitors or employees. He had flagged a black analyst named Jerome for a random desk search twice in 1 month. He had removed a Hispanic contractor named Reyes from a client-facing project, citing communication issues that no one else on the team had ever observed. He had written a performance review for a junior associate named Amara that used the phrase, "not a culture fit," 4 times in 2 pages, despite her billing numbers being the highest on the team. Pattern, system, design. The investigation report landed on Sandra's desk 8 days later. 42 pages. The conclusion was 1 sentence long. The evidence indicates a sustained and deliberate pattern of racially motivated conduct by Craig Dutton over a period of at least 36 months. Craig was formally terminated that same day. The letter cited gross misconduct, violation of Lakebridge's anti-discrimination policy, and conduct causing material financial harm to the company. His severance was denied. His access to all company systems was permanently revoked. Craig hired a lawyer. The lawyer reviewed the security footage, the visitor logs, the HR reports, and the 42-page investigation file. 2 days later, the lawyer called Craig and told him he was dropping the case. There was nothing to defend. But the consequences didn't stop at Lakebridge's front door. 3 days after Craig's termination, the lobby footage appeared on the internet. Nobody knew exactly who leaked it. The investigation never confirmed a source. But the clip of Craig pointing at Wesley and saying the refugee line was uploaded to social media at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had 400,000 views. By midnight, it crossed 2 million. The clip played on local Charlotte news first. Then regional outlets picked it up. Then national. A CNN anchor played the footage on a split screen next to Lakebridge's corporate website. The contrast was brutal. The company's homepage banner read, "Inclusion, Innovation, Integrity," while the footage showed Craig telling a black man to use the service entrance. Lakebridge was forced to issue a public statement. Sandra wrote it herself. It didn't use the word misunderstanding once. Wesley released a statement through Pinnacle's PR team the same day. It was 4 sentences long. He didn't attack Lakebridge. He didn't name Craig. He simply said that he would not do business with any organization that tolerated discrimination at any level, and that he trusted Lakebridge to prove they were better than what he experienced that morning. 4 sentences. And they hit harder than 100. The public pressure mounted. Lakebridge's stock dipped 9% in a week. 2 mid-level clients paused their contracts pending review. A coalition of Charlotte business leaders sent a private letter to Sandra urging immediate reform. Then came the legal front. Wesley's attorneys filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission on behalf of the Latina consultant and the South Asian vendor Craig had mistreated. Both were contacted. Both agreed to participate. A civil rights attorney named Harold Graves took the case pro bono. He told a reporter that Craig's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It was a policy without a name. The EEOC investigation took 3 months. The finding was clear. Craig Dutton had engaged in a pattern of discriminatory conduct in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. A civil lawsuit followed. Craig was ordered to pay $180,000 in combined damages to the 3 complainants. His professional life collapsed in parallel. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with messages. Former colleagues distanced themselves publicly. One gave an interview to the Charlotte Observer and said something that stuck. Everyone knew. Nobody said anything. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Meanwhile, Lakebridge was rebuilding. Sandra implemented a company-wide overhaul, mandatory bias training for every employee, a new diversity oversight board with external members, a completely redesigned visitor protocol that removed individual gatekeeping authority. No single person would ever again have the power to decide who belonged in that lobby. Wesley watched all of this from a distance. He read the reports. He reviewed the reforms. He talked to Sandra twice by phone. He waited. On the 46th day after walking out of that conference room, Wesley Adams sat back down at the same mahogany table. This time, he brought a revised term sheet. Pinnacle Equity Group would acquire a 51% controlling stake in Lakebridge Consulting, not 40%. The price remained $300 million, but the terms had changed. Wesley would personally appoint a chief equity officer as a condition of the deal. This person would report directly to the board, not to Sandra, not to Nolan, not to anyone inside the existing structure. Lakebridge accepted every condition without negotiation. Wesley signed the deal at 10:02 a.m., almost the exact same time he had been sitting on that bench 2 months earlier. 18 months later, Lakebridge Consulting Group looked like a different company. Not the building. The building was the same. Same glass walls, same marble lobby, same silver sign by the elevator. But the people inside it had changed. The energy had changed. The rules had changed. Wesley Adams sat on the board of directors. He attended quarterly meetings in the same conference room where he had once laid out the worst morning of his professional life. He still wore the same navy blazer. He still carried the same leather portfolio. And yes, he still drove the gray Honda Accord. 3 years old when this story started, almost 5 now. Not a single scratch. His parking spot was next to Sandra's, right by the elevator. The Accord sat between a white Tesla and a black BMW. It still looked like a typo. He still didn't care. Under Wesley's oversight, Lakebridge doubled its diversity in senior leadership within 18 months. Not through quotas, not through press releases, through hiring practices that actually looked at people instead of looking past them. The chief equity officer he appointed, a woman named Grace from Detroit with 20 years in corporate civil rights, had restructured everything from recruitment pipelines to promotion criteria. Diane Caldwell no longer sat behind the front desk. She had been promoted to office manager. She ran the entire visitor experience program now. She trained every new front desk employee personally. Her training didn't come from a manual. It came from a bench outside the building, and 2 hours she would never forget. Diane kept one thing on her desk, a framed printout of the visitor log from that morning. Wesley Adams, Pinnacle Equity Group, 9:45 a.m. Confirmed appointment. Priority status. She kept it there so she would never stop being angry about what happened. Because anger, she had learned, was only dangerous when you swallowed it. When you used it, it built things. Terrence Shaw had stepped into a new role too. He now led Pinnacle's Social Impact Fund, a $200 million initiative that invested specifically in minority-owned businesses across the Southeast. The fund had backed 31 companies in its first year. 12 of them were founded by people who had once been told they didn't belong in rooms exactly like the one at Lakebridge. Nolan Foster stayed at the company. He personally wrote the new anti-discrimination policy. Every word. He told an interviewer from the Charlotte Observer that what happened in the lobby was the most important failure of his career. Not because it cost the company money, because it showed him what he had been willing to overlook for the sake of keeping things comfortable. "I walked past Craig's behavior for years," Nolan said. "I told myself it wasn't my department, that someone else would handle it. That's not neutrality. That's permission." And Craig Dutton? Craig moved out of Charlotte 3 months after the lawsuit settled. He took a mid-level sales position at a small firm in another state. He never made a public statement. He never apologized. He never acknowledged what he did. Not in court, not online, not to anyone. Some people learn from moments like this. Some people just relocate. The bench outside the Lakebridge building is still there. Same concrete, same spot. Most people walk past it without a second thought. But every now and then, a new employee will ask Diane about it, and Diane will tell them the story. All of it, from the first word to the last.
She always ends it the same way.
That bench is where a man sat for 2 hours because someone decided he didn't matter. And it's where this company learned that silence is the same thing as a decision. So here's my question, and I really want to hear your answer in the comments. Have you ever been in a room where someone decided who you were before you opened your mouth? What did you do? And what do you wish you had done? If this story hit you in any kind of way, drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because these stories matter, and so does your voice.